Hey, this is Tony from the Cold Case Project, where we focus on unsolved cases across the United States. Our mission is to bring attention to these unresolved mysteries that need your help. All the information we cover in these cases is readily available on the internet, but we rewrite and repurpose it for the purpose of these videos. Our goal is to spread the word about the thousands of unsolved cold cases still out there. Thank you for watching. If you want to help shed light on these cases, make sure to like and subscribe for more content. Your support can make a difference.
The disappearance of Eric Lee Franks is a deeply complex and troubling case that spans over a decade, involving multiple layers of mystery, conflicting stories, and unanswered questions. Eric, a 38-year-old man from Saginaw, Michigan, vanished in March 2011 under circumstances that remain unclear. His case is a labyrinth of relationships, alleged threats, and suspicious behavior, leaving his family and investigators searching for answers. This detailed account will explore the events leading up to his disappearance, the key players involved, the theories surrounding his fate, and the ongoing efforts to uncover the truth. Eric Lee Franks was a man who loved children, enjoyed communicating with friends on social media, and had a passion for reading, movies, and writing. Born in 1972, Eric was adopted as an infant by Joanne and her husband, who raised him alongside their biological daughter. Eric grew up in a loving family, enjoying vacations, family outings, and a close bond with his parents. As an adult, Eric faced challenges, including a failed marriage and financial struggles, but he remained close to his family and friends. In 2010, Eric's life took a dramatic turn when he reconnected with an old flame, Kendra Birmingham, through Facebook. Kendra, who lived in Saginaw, Michigan, revealed to Eric that she had a teenage daughter, Emily, who was biologically his child. This revelation shocked Eric, who had no idea he had a child from his brief relationship with Kendra nearly 2 decades earlier. Eager to meet his daughter and rekindle his relationship with Kendra, Eric moved to Michigan in October 2010, leaving behind his life in Ohio. Eric checked into the Miller Motel in Bridgeport Township, Michigan, in October 2010. Over the next 5 months, he spent time with Kendra and Emily, working odd jobs and trying to build a relationship with his newfound family. However, the dynamics between Eric, Kendra, and her husband, John Carnes, were complicated. Kendra and John were married, but reportedly had an open relationship, and Kendra's interactions with Eric were often inconsistent and manipulative. On March 10, 2011, Eric had his last known conversation with his mother, Joanne. He told her he was planning to move to a rural area with poor cell phone reception and asked her not to mail anything else to the motel. This was the last time Joanne heard her son's voice. Over the next few days, Eric's presence at the motel became uncertain. The motel owner claimed to have seen Eric on March 14th, when he paid his rent for the week, but by March 21st, Eric's car was gone, and Kendra arrived at the motel alone to clean out his room. She claimed Eric had left town, possibly heading to California, but no one ever saw him again. Eric's disappearance went unnoticed for months. His family and friends grew concerned when he stopped responding to messages and calls. In November 2011, Joanne reported Eric missing, sparking an investigation that would uncover a web of lies, threats, and suspicious behavior. Kendra Birmingham. Kendra was Eric's former girlfriend and the mother of his daughter, Emily. She played a central role in Eric's life during the months leading up to his disappearance. Kendra's stories about Eric's whereabouts and activities were inconsistent and often contradictory. She claimed to have last seen Eric in April 2011, but the motel owner disputed this, stating that Kendra cleaned out Eric's room on March 21st and turned in his key, claiming Eric had left town. Kendra's behavior raised red flags, especially after it was revealed that she had possession of Eric's phone and used it to make calls after his disappearance. John Carnes. John was Kendra's husband and the stepfather of Emily. Despite being married to Kendra, John was aware of Eric's relationship with her and even facilitated their initial reconnection. John allegedly threatened Eric, telling him to stay away from Kendra or face dire consequences. Witnesses reported hearing John threaten Eric, and some believe John may have been involved in Eric's disappearance. John's shady past, including legal troubles and questionable business dealings, added to the suspicion surrounding him. Emily Franks, Eric's biological daughter, Emily, was a teenager at the time of his disappearance. While Emily was not directly implicated in Eric's disappearance, her relationship with her mother and stepfather raised questions. Emily was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer shortly after Eric vanished, and Kendra was also diagnosed with cancer. The timing of these diagnoses, coupled with Kendra's alleged death in 2016, added another layer of mystery to the case. The motel owner and witnesses. The owner of the Miller Motel provided crucial information about Eric's last days. He stated that Eric paid his rent on March 14th and was seen at the motel until March 16th. After that, Eric's room appeared abandoned, and Kendra arrived on March 20th to clean it out. The motel owner also mentioned that Kendra and Eric had a close relationship, often seen hugging and spending time together. Another witness, a neighbor at the motel, reported hearing John threaten Eric, adding credibility to the theory that John may have been involved in Eric's disappearance. Additional theories include foul play by John Carnes. Many believe that John Carnes, motivated by jealousy or a desire to protect his family, may have harmed Eric. Witnesses reported hearing John threaten Eric, and John's history of violence and legal troubles made him a prime suspect. The fact that Eric's car was later found hidden in the garage of an elderly man connected to Kendra and John further fueled this theory. Kendra's involvement. Kendra's inconsistent stories and possession of Eric's phone raised suspicions about her role in his disappearance. Some believe Kendra may have manipulated Eric and John, playing them against each other. Her alleged death in 2016, which her own family questioned, added to the mystery. If Kendra faked her death, it could have been an attempt to escape legal consequences or start a new life. Accident or cover-up. Another theory suggests that Eric may have been the victim of an accident, possibly involving a car crash or drowning. His car was found with a small amount of blood on the driver's seat, but no other evidence was discovered. If Eric died accidentally, those close to him may have covered it up to avoid scrutiny. Eric's voluntary disappearance. While unlikely, some speculate that Eric may have chosen to disappear voluntarily. However, this theory is contradicted by Eric's close relationship with his family and his eagerness to build a relationship with his daughter. Eric's family, led by his mother Joanne, has tirelessly searched for answers over the past decade. They have worked with law enforcement, private investigators, and online communities to keep Eric's case in the public eye. Key developments in the case include discovery of Eric's car. In September 2020, Eric's car, a 2001 Chevrolet Malibu, was found hidden in the garage of Gerald Rutledge, an elderly man connected to Kendra and John. The car had a small amount of blood on the driver's seat, which was confirmed to be Eric's through DNA testing. However, no other evidence was found in the vehicle. Kendra's alleged death. In August 2016, Kendra Birmingham reportedly died of cancer. However, her family has expressed doubts about her death, suggesting that she may have faked it to escape legal trouble or start a new life. The circumstances surrounding her death remain unclear, and her family continues to question the official narrative. Ongoing investigation. The Michigan State Police have taken over Eric's case, but progress has been slow. Eric's family hopes that new leads or evidence will emerge to shed light on his disappearance. If you have any information about Eric Lee Franks or his disappearance, please contact the Michigan State Police or visit the Facebook page, Find Eric Lee Franks, to share your tips. Zion Foster's tragic and mysterious disappearance and the subsequent investigation into her death serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of familial relationships that can go awry and the horrifying consequences of deceit and manipulation. Her case, which initially seemed to involve a family member's involvement in a search for her, quickly escalated into a tale of lies, manipulation, and murder. On January 4, 2022, Zion Foster, a 17-year-old high school student, was last seen at her home in the 22,000 block of Melrose Court in East Point, Michigan. At approximately 10:40 p.m., Zion left her home and got into a white sedan with tinted windows. She later sent a text to her mother, telling her she was at a house on Greenfield Road and Vassar Drive. This would be the last communication Zion had with her family. She left behind all her personal belongings, including her clothes, and never returned home. Later, Zion sent a text to her mother at 12:59 a.m. on January 5th, saying she was on her way home. However, Zion never arrived, and no one heard from her again. Her disappearance was out of character. Zion had run away before, but she always stayed in contact with her family. This sudden, unexplained absence triggered immediate concern. Just 2 weeks after Zion's disappearance, the police honed in on a person of interest, Jalen Brazier, Zion's cousin by marriage. The relationship between Zion and Jalen was somewhat close. She often spent time with him, and she had even stated that he was her favorite relative from that side of the family. This made him one of the first people authorities focused on when Zion went missing. Jalen had been the one to pick Zion up that evening. According to the initial timeline, the two were supposed to meet for a short period of time, with Zion even texting her mother her location during the evening. However, after Zion was last seen getting into the car with Jalen, everything went quiet. When Zion's mother reached out to Brazier to ask about her daughter, he claimed that he hadn't seen Zion in 3 years, which Zion's mother knew was a lie. The discrepancies in his statements raised suspicions. On January 24th, 2022, Brazier was charged with lying to a peace officer during a violent crime investigation, including lying about his involvement in Zion's case. In a shocking turn of events, Brazier admitted to Zion's mother that he had been with Zion the night she disappeared. He claimed that the two were smoking marijuana together when Zion suddenly stopped breathing and died. In his panicked state, Brazier said he disposed of her body in a dumpster, then continued to pretend to search for Zion after her disappearance was reported. This confession, however, raised more questions than it answered. First, if Zion had indeed died suddenly and without any clear cause, why was there no indication of foul play? And why did Jalen, who was so involved in searching for Zion, provide such a bizarre and unsubstantiated account of her death? Brazier's confession and his role in the case only deepened the mystery. Although he had initially agreed to help search for Zion, his story of Zion's sudden death was highly suspicious, especially given that he had lied about the length of time he had known her. At his trial, further evidence surfaced that painted a disturbing picture of the relationship between Zion and Brazier. Jalen's ex-girlfriend testified that she had driven home with him during the early morning hours of January 5th and noticed a deep, bloody scratch on his collarbone. Brazier told her that it had come from her pet cat, but his ex-girlfriend had doubts, claiming that her cat had never scratched anyone that badly. This scratch would later become a critical part of the evidence against him. Police also examined Brazier's phone and internet search history. Some of his online queries raised even more suspicions, including searches about drugs, how certain substances could possibly kill someone, and whether it was possible to be charged with murder without a body. Additionally, Zion and Brazier had exchanged over 4,000 text messages, many of which were sexually explicit in nature. The prosecution argued that these texts showed that Jalen had groomed Zion for a sexual relationship, pointing to multiple links to cousin porn found on his phone. At trial, Brazier's defense attempted to argue that Zion may have died of natural causes or that the marijuana they were smoking could have been laced with something harmful. However, forensic evidence contradicted these theories. A forensic pathologist who reviewed Zion's medical history found no underlying health conditions that would have explained her sudden death, as claimed by Brazier. Furthermore, the defense failed to present any significant counterarguments or witnesses to dispute the prosecution's case. After deliberating for only 30 minutes, the jury convicted Brazier of second-degree murder. The evidence of manipulation, his lies, and the disturbing nature of his relationship with Zion were enough for the jury to find him guilty. In June 2024, Jalen Brazier was sentenced to 43 to 100 years in prison for the second-degree murder of Zion Foster. The sentencing was a small measure of justice for the young woman whose life had been tragically cut short, and for the family left to mourn her loss. Zion's case remains a poignant reminder of the dangers of abuse, manipulation, and the horrors that can lurk behind seemingly close family relationships. As the oldest of 6 children, Zion's disappearance had a devastating impact on her family, especially her mother. Though Zion's body was never found, the details surrounding her death and the actions of her cousin were enough to secure conviction, giving her family a sense of closure, though no amount of justice could ever replace the life that was lost. In the months following Zion's disappearance, authorities conducted an extensive search for her remains, focusing particularly on the Pine Tree Acres landfill in Macomb County, Michigan, where they hoped to find evidence of her body. The search effort, which lasted for several months and cost nearly $1 million, ultimately proved unsuccessful, ending in October 2022. Despite their exhaustive efforts, Zion's body was never recovered. Her case remains unsolved. Augustine Floyd, a 22-year-old student at Northwestern Michigan College, vanished on October 12, 2007, under circumstances that have left his family and authorities searching for answers to this day. His disappearance remains one of the many unsolved mysteries in Michigan, with his family desperate for justice and closure. On the night of October 12, 2007, Augustine Floyd attended a concert by the popular rap artist T-Pain at Central Michigan University in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. The concert was an exciting event, and Floyd, a young man known for his outgoing and vibrant personality, was looking forward to enjoying the night. After the concert, Floyd and some friends decided to continue the festivities by attending a party at the Isabella Indian Reservation on East Remus Road, not far from Mount Pleasant. The party at the reservation was already in full swing when Floyd arrived. However, things soon took a turn. Floyd had a confrontation with other guests at the party, which led to a physical altercation. As a result, he was thrown out of the party. Despite this setback, Floyd wasn't deterred. He returned to the party a short time later, although the exact circumstances of his return remain unclear. Around 4 a.m., Floyd was seen standing near his black 1995 Cadillac DeVille, parked near the party. He was alone, and there was no sign of any trouble or immediate danger at the time. That was the last known sighting of Augustine Floyd. He never returned to his home in Suttons Bay, Michigan, and no one has heard from him since. When Floyd disappeared, his vehicle, a black 1995 Cadillac DeVille, also vanished with him. The car had a distinctive feature. A bungee cord was used to hold the damaged trunk shut, a detail that stood out to authorities. The car also had a blue Michigan license plate, numbered AN 4697, which had expired in May 2008. This vehicle, which had become a symbol of the case, was never recovered, adding to the mystery of Floyd's disappearance. It was uncharacteristic of Floyd to vanish without a trace. Those who knew him described him as someone who stayed in regular contact with his family and friends. The idea that he could simply disappear and cut off all communication was out of character, and his family was immediately concerned when he failed to return home the following day. Floyd's family, particularly his grandmother with whom he was living at the time, was left in a state of deep anxiety and worry. They had already endured great trauma just a few years prior. Floyd's mother had been murdered in 2002 by her husband, Floyd's stepfather. Floyd was injured while attempting to defend his mother in the brutal attack. The trauma of his mother's murder and the subsequent years spent living with his grandmother made his sudden disappearance even more devastating. His family had already been through unimaginable pain, and now they were facing the possibility that something even worse had happened to their loved one. At the time of his disappearance, Floyd was a student at Northwestern Michigan College. Despite his promising future, he had some personal struggles. Floyd had a warrant out for his arrest in Grand Rapids, Michigan, after he failed to appear for sentencing in connection with a legal issue. This aspect of his life added a layer of complexity to the case, as authorities initially wondered whether Floyd had gone into hiding to avoid facing his legal troubles. However, Those who knew Floyd insisted that it was not in his nature to run from his responsibilities. He had always been close to his family, and his sudden disappearance without any communication was deeply out of character. His family and friends were baffled by the events, unable to understand why he would have left without a word, especially given his close relationships with those who cared for him. The investigation into Floyd's disappearance initially seemed like a missing persons case, with authorities hoping to find him alive and well. However, as time went on, suspicions grew. In December 2008, over a year after Floyd went missing, the case was reclassified as a probable homicide. Authorities believed that Floyd's disappearance was no longer a case of a young man running away, but rather a violent crime in which he had met with foul play. Investigators stated that they had one primary suspect in Floyd's case, though they indicated that there may have been multiple individuals involved in what they believed to be his murder. The exact circumstances surrounding Floyd's presumed death remain unclear, as there is no physical evidence to conclusively point to how he died or where his body might be. Despite the reclassification of the case and the suspicion of homicide, authorities have not made any arrests in connection with Floyd's disappearance. The case remains unsolved, leaving his family to deal with the pain of uncertainty. They have been left to wonder whether someone in their community knows more about what happened to their loved one than they are letting on. While the investigation has yielded few concrete answers, there are a few prevailing theories about what may have happened to Floyd. One possibility is that the altercation at the party on East Remus Road escalated further, leading to his abduction or death. Given that he was last seen near his car, it's possible that Floyd was confronted by someone after his return to the party. However, it's unclear why such an altercation would lead to his disappearance, especially if he had already been thrown out of the party once. Another theory is that Floyd may have been involved in something more sinister, such as an illegal activity that could have led to his murder. Some speculated that his arrest warrant may have been a factor in his disappearance, though it seems unlikely that he would have chosen to abandon everything and go into hiding under such circumstances. Authorities have not publicly confirmed any connection between his legal troubles and his disappearance, leaving it unclear how much his past might have played a role in what happened that night. Floyd's case remains open, but as the years go by, the likelihood of finding answers fades. His black Cadillac DeVille has never been located, and the details of his disappearance continue to elude investigators. On the evening of September 8, 2007, 66-year-old Donald Deets was last seen riding his bicycle home from the Myers store in Saranac, Michigan. Known as the Bicycle Man in his local community, Deets was a reclusive yet harmless figure who lived a quiet, frugal life in his modest trailer on a remote 20-acre property near the Ione Estate game area. But on that fateful day, he vanished without a trace. Days later, when his concerned family checked his home, they found nothing missing except some financial papers. What at first seemed like an unexplained disappearance soon unraveled into a chilling case of identity theft, fraud, and suspected murder. Deets was known for his peculiarities. He avoided human interaction and lived with extreme frugality despite having amassed nearly $450,000 in his bank accounts. He patched his shoes with duct tape instead of buying new ones, rode a bicycle even during harsh Michigan winters despite owning a car, and spoke little to anyone about his personal life. His reclusiveness may have made him seem an unlikely target, but his financial stability and lack of social connections made him vulnerable. A week before his disappearance, Deets had an unsettling conversation with his barber. He confided that he feared for his life, claiming someone was pressuring him to invest his money and had become threatening when he refused. He had even given this person access to his bank accounts, and they had visited his home. More disturbingly, Deets suspected he was being followed. His paranoia wasn't unfounded. On September 19, 2007, just over a week after Deets was last seen, a man named Rami Iqbal Saba attempted to withdraw nearly $500,000 from Deets' bank account and transfer it to an account in Lebanon. The fraudulent attempt raised immediate red flags, leading authorities to investigate Saba's activities. Saba had been impersonating Deets, forging his signature, and cashing thousands of dollars worth of checks. He had assumed the identity of the missing man so convincingly that he had access to all his financial assets. Then, on September 30th, an eerie phone call came to Deets' brother. The caller, claiming to be Deets, said he had gotten a girl pregnant and was planning to travel to Greece with her, but had suffered a stroke. He needed money. The voice had a foreign accent, and Deets' brother, suspicious, asked the caller to provide their mother's maiden name. The man hung up immediately. Deets' family had no doubt someone was using his identity. But where was Donald Deets? In December 2007, federal agents raided Saba's home in Lowell, Michigan, uncovering evidence of his fraudulent schemes. He was promptly arrested and charged with multiple counts of mail fraud, bank fraud, and aggravated identity theft. However, these charges were purely financial. There was still no proof of what had happened to Deets. 2 years later, in January 2009, authorities unsealed an indictment against Saba's longtime friend, Ryogo Ouedraogo, a native of Burkina Faso living in Philadelphia. Ouedraogo, like Saba, had an impressive academic background. Both men were biologists with doctorates, having met in graduate school in Belgium. Despite their intellectual credentials, they had been drawn into a dark conspiracy, one that seemingly led to Deets' murder. The FBI discovered that Ouedraogo had flown into Grand Rapids late on the night of September 11th, 2007, 3 days after Deets disappeared. But for the next 14 hours, he could not account for his whereabouts. Investigators believed he and Saba had worked together to abduct and kill Deets, allowing them to assume his identity and drain his finances. In 2009, the charges escalated. Saba and Ouedraogo were now accused of kidnapping, resulting in death, and conspiracy to commit murder for hire. The case took another shocking turn when Saba, while in custody, allegedly confessed to fellow inmates that he had killed Deets. According to these inmates, Saba claimed the murder had not been premeditated but provided no further details on what had happened to the body. Saba's trial in June 2011 resulted in a conviction. He was sentenced to 32 years in prison. Meanwhile, Ouedraogo's fate played out differently. In April 2011, he was also convicted, but in December of that year, the judge overturned his conviction, stating there was no direct evidence linking him to the crime. While his murder charge was dismissed, he was still found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder for hire and sentenced to 5 years in prison. Ouedraogo has continued to maintain his innocence. Despite the convictions, one major question remains: where is Donald Deets' body? Authorities have never recovered his remains, leaving an unsettling void in the case. His family has never had the opportunity to properly bury him, and without a body, speculation continues. Was he buried in a remote location near his property? Was his body disposed of in a way that made recovery impossible? Or, in a more disturbing theory, could he still be alive somewhere, held against his will or suffering from amnesia? Deets, a retired Amway worker and lifelong bachelor, lived a life of simplicity. He neither drank nor socialized much, making him an easy mark for two educated criminals looking to exploit his assets. His fate, while legally resolved, remains clouded by mystery. Years have passed, but the case of Donald Deets remains one of the most haunting disappearances in Michigan's history. A meek and vulnerable man, who only wanted to be left alone, fell prey to a sophisticated and ruthless scheme that ultimately cost him his life. Though justice has been served in a courtroom, the truth, the whole truth, has likely died with him. The case of Helen Diamond, a 48-year-old mother from Tilden Township, Michigan, who vanished on the night of June 28, 1981, remains one of the most perplexing and heartbreaking unsolved disappearances in the region. Helen was last seen leaving the Tilden Township Club after a night of drinking, following a brief argument with her husband, Roy. She intended to walk less than a mile to her son's house, a route she had taken before after similar disagreements. However, she never arrived, and her disappearance has left her family and community searching for answers for over 4 decades. Helen and Roy had attended a private gathering at the Tilden Township Club on the evening of June 28, 1981. Both had consumed alcohol, and by the end of the night, they got into a minor argument. Roy decided to drive home alone, leaving Helen at the club. Witnesses reported that Helen was upset, but declined offers for a ride, insisting she would walk to her son's house, which was less than a mile away. She was last seen walking down a dark road, heading in the direction of her son's home. Tragically, she was never seen again. The following morning, when Helen failed to return home, her family grew concerned. Roy called their daughter, Betsy, to ask if Helen was with her. When it became clear that Helen was missing, the family began searching for her. The police were notified, and a search was conducted, but no trace of Helen was found. The only potential clues were a woman's loafer discovered near the club, and 2 months later, a purple jacket found on a footpath off County Road 476 West. The jacket was similar to the one Helen had been wearing that night, but the police dismissed it as unrelated, despite the family's insistence that it was hers. Over the years, several theories have emerged about what might have happened to Helen. Her family firmly believes she was the victim of foul play, as it was out of character for her to disappear voluntarily. Some of the key theories and suspects include Roy Diamond. As is often the case in missing persons investigations, the spouse is the first suspect. Roy and Helen had a history of arguments, especially when drinking, but Roy passed a lie detector test and was never formally accused. His behavior in the days following Helen's disappearance, distraught and actively searching for her, led many, including his family, to believe he was not involved. Lee Dobson, a local man with a reputation for drunkenness and erratic behavior. Dobson lived near the route Helen would have taken to her son's house. He allegedly made a chilling statement to Helen's daughter, Betsy, years later, claiming he had killed somebody once. While this could have been a drunken boast, it raised suspicions, especially given his proximity to the area where Helen vanished. Norm Kemp and Ernie Carlson. In 1988, Norm Kemp came forward with a story involving Ernie Carlson, a local man who had since passed away. Kemp claimed that Carlson had confessed to hitting Helen with his car while drunk, panicking, and burying her on a nearby farm. The police investigated the farm, but found nothing conclusive. Kemp's credibility was questioned, and the story remains unverified. The unsolved sexual assault case. Less than 2 years after Helen's disappearance, a woman in National Mine was brutally attacked in her home by an unidentified man. The attacker wore a train conductor's hat and had eyes that were unusually close together. He threatened to kill her if she reported the crime. This attack, along with other incidents involving middle-aged women in the area, led some to speculate that Helen may have encountered a similar predator that night. Helen's granddaughter, Holly Letson, has been at the forefront of the family's efforts to uncover the truth. Over the past 2 decades, Holly has tirelessly researched her grandmother's case, interviewed witnesses, and worked with former law enforcement officials to re-examine the evidence. She has also created a Facebook page, The Disappearance of Helen Diamond, and a website, whereishelendiamond.com, to raise awareness and gather information. Holly's efforts have brought renewed attention to the case, but many questions remain unanswered. The family's primary goal is to find Helen's remains and give her a proper burial. They believe that someone in the community knows what happened to her and are pleading for anyone with information to come forward, even anonymously. One of the most frustrating aspects of the case is the possibility that Helen's body may have been disposed of in one of the many mining pits in the area. These pits, filled with water, were never thoroughly searched, despite the family's requests. In 1981, plans to drain one of the pits were halted due to environmental concerns and complaint from a local resident about the impact on her ducks. The family remains convinced that the pits hold the key to solving the mystery, but without a comprehensive search, this theory remains unproven. The purple jacket found in 1981 is another source of frustration. While the police dismissed it as unrelated, Helen's family identified it as hers based on its unique features, including the missing drawstring and distinctive buttons. The jacket was later destroyed as part of routine evidence disposal, leaving the family without a crucial piece of potential evidence. Helen's disappearance is not an isolated incident. In the early 1980s, several women in the National Mine area were targeted in violent crimes, including the 1983 sexual assault of a woman who lived near the route Helen would have taken. These cases suggest the possibility of a serial predator operating in the area at the time. While no direct connection has been proven, the similarities between these incidents and Helen's disappearance are striking. Holly Letson and her family continue to hope that someone will come forward with information that could finally solve the mystery of Helen's disappearance. As Holly has said, even an anonymous tip leading to Helen's remains would provide some measure of peace for a family that has waited far too long for answers. Lily Dunn, a 26-year-old woman, vanished without a trace on the night of July 31st, 1980, in Southgate, Michigan, leaving behind a trail of confusion, speculation, and an unsolved mystery that has lingered for decades. Dunn, who is known for her beauty and charm, had been enjoying a night out with friends, unaware that it would be the last time anyone would see her. The evening started innocuously enough. Lily left her home in Southgate around 6:30 p.m. on July 31st to go bowling. Her destination was a local bowling alley, and it was supposed to be a fun, relaxing night with her friends. Afterward, they decided to go to a lounge on Ford Road in nearby Dearborn, Michigan. This was a popular spot for locals, and it seemed like an ordinary night out for Lily. By 2:30 a.m., Lily had returned home. She drove into her garage, seemingly ready to call it a night. But just moments after she parked her car, everything went terribly wrong. Someone, a stranger or possibly someone she knew, attacked her as she was walking into her house. At least 2 witnesses saw the assault take place. Both were reportedly standing nearby and observed the horrific scene unfold in front of them. However, neither of them intervened, as they assumed the incident was just a domestic argument or a confrontation that would resolve itself. The witnesses would later regret not stepping in, as what they had witnessed turned out to be far more dangerous and tragic than they could have known at the time. The attacker, described as a man around 6 feet tall and weighing approximately 200 pounds, was said to have curly, dark-colored hair. He physically forced Lily into a late-model light-colored car, either a Buick Pontiac Grand Prix or Oldsmobile Cutlass. Lily fought desperately, kicking and screaming as the abductor shoved her into the vehicle. The car sped off into the night, with no one able to prevent the horrific abduction. In the aftermath, authorities found a few items of Lily's scattered on the street near her home. Her purse, a hairbrush, and shoes were abandoned on the pavement, a chilling reminder of the suddenness of the attack. Those personal belongings were all that remained of Lily Dunn, leaving her family and friends with little more than unanswered questions and the unbearable uncertainty of her fate. As the investigation into Lily's disappearance unfolded, one particular theory began to dominate: the possibility that Lily Dunn was another victim of a serial killer who had been operating in the region. The man at the center of these suspicions was Coral Eugene Watts, a notorious killer who was known to target young Caucasian women in both Texas and Michigan. Watts had already been linked to 12 murders, though law enforcement believed his actual body count was likely much higher. He was a highly elusive predator, often able to avoid capture for long periods of time, and his crimes were methodical and disturbing. What made Watts a prime suspect in Lily's case was the striking similarities between her disappearance and the patterns of his known victims. Watts had a particular preference for young women, and his modus operandi often involved abducting them and violently taking them to remote locations. His victims were frequently found dead, their bodies left in secluded spots. Authorities suspected that Lily's abduction may have been part of a larger, more sinister pattern, especially considering that she fit the profile of Watts's previous victims. Despite the compelling evidence and circumstantial connections, there was no direct proof that Lily Dunn was among Watts's victims. No physical evidence linked him to her case, and her body was never recovered. Coral Eugene Watts died in 2007 while serving a life sentence in a Michigan prison, but by then, it was too late to resolve the mystery surrounding Lily's disappearance. At the time of her disappearance, Lily Dunn was married and had a young daughter, making her disappearance all the more heartbreaking. Her family and friends were left to pick up the pieces of their lives, struggling to make sense of what happened to her. Lily had worked for the Detroit News before her disappearance and had also been a part-time model. She had many aspirations and dreams, and her life was just beginning to unfold when it was tragically cut short. The loss of Lily was felt deeply by everyone who knew her. She had been a bright, vibrant woman with a promising future ahead of her, and her sudden disappearance sent shockwaves through her community. Those closest to her continued to hold on to the hope that one day, the truth would come out, that they would learn what really happened to Lily and finally have the answers they so desperately needed. Lily Dunn's case remained unsolved for years, with the investigation running cold. Authorities followed every lead they could, but nothing substantial ever came to light. The possibility that she had been a victim of Coral Eugene Watts, one of the most infamous serial killers in the region, continued to loom over the investigation. Still, without concrete evidence or a body, the case could not be closed. To this day, Lily Dunn's disappearance remains a mystery. Joyce Fischer's disappearance on April 16, 1978, has remained one of Michigan's most tragic and mysterious cases, filled with heartbreaking twists, suspicious behavior, and unanswered questions. Her case is marked by the presence of a controlling and abusive estranged husband, a series of conflicting accounts, and a legal saga that would span decades, ultimately failing to bring the closure that Joyce's family so desperately sought. On that fateful afternoon in April 1978, Joyce Fischer left her parents' summer cottage on Indian Lake in Keeler Township, Michigan, at around 3:00 p.m. She was accompanied by her 1-year-old daughter, whom she left in the care of her mother. Joyce had a specific task in mind. She was headed to an antique store called Bell's Corner in nearby Sister Lakes, Michigan, to meet her estranged husband, Jerry Wayne Fischer, with whom she had been separated for several months. Joyce and Jerry were in the midst of a contentious divorce, and their relationship had been troubled for some time. Joyce had expressed fear for her safety and for the well-being of their daughter, having confided in family and friends that Jerry had physically abused her on multiple occasions. She had taken steps to protect herself and her daughter, even going as far as to resign from her teaching position at the Dowagiac Union School District and move in with her parents in the Chicago metropolitan area. But despite her efforts to distance herself, Joyce was still tethered to Jerry by their daughter and the finalization of their divorce. On the day Joyce disappeared, she had planned to meet Jerry at Bell's Corner so they could sign over the title of a car she owned, a 1969 Buick, so that Jerry could sell it. The plan seemed simple: sign the paperwork and return to her daughter. However, things quickly took a dark turn. Joyce arrived at Bell's Corner, a quaint antique store that was a known spot in Sister Lakes, and met Jerry there as planned. According to Jerry, they had driven only a short distance when Joyce realized they had the wrong car title. Jerry claimed that he had to take Joyce back to the store to retrieve the correct one. They arrived at Bell's Corner between 4:00 and 4:30 p.m., and Joyce told the owner of the store that she would return in about half an hour. She appeared calm and collected, with no sign of distress or anything unusual. However, things quickly unraveled from there. Jerry later claimed that he had dropped Joyce off at the store and gone on his way. He said they only drove a short distance before realizing the title mix-up, but he didn't elaborate on where he had gone after he dropped Joyce off. According to Jerry, he returned to the store alone, without Joyce, and was seen by witnesses at around 4:30 p.m. While Jerry's account suggested a routine exchange at the antique store, several witnesses who were at Bell's Corner that day had a very different story. They reported seeing Jerry arrive alone, without Joyce. Joyce's disappearance was sudden and unexplained. No one saw her leave, and there was no sign of any conflict or struggle at the store. The Buick that Joyce had been driving was later found parked in front of Bell's Corner, but Joyce herself was nowhere to be found. No one witnessed her leaving the store or getting into any vehicle, and there was no indication of where she had gone. Despite the apparent calm at the store, Joyce's sudden absence and the conflicting account from Jerry made authorities suspicious from the outset. Investigators began to question Jerry's version of events and his involvement in his wife's disappearance. As the investigation unfolded, Jerry Fischer's behavior became increasingly suspect. He refused to cooperate with authorities, hiring an attorney shortly after Joyce disappeared. He gave no helpful information to the police, and his reluctance to engage in the investigation raised even more questions. His behavior seemed evasive, and he appeared to have little concern for Joyce's well-being. Meanwhile, Joyce's family was devastated by her disappearance. They knew something was terribly wrong. Joyce had always been responsible and reliable, and it was uncharacteristic for her to leave without a word, especially when her daughter was waiting for her. She was a loving mother who had always put her child's needs first, and her family could not believe that she would abandon her daughter without explanation. The most chilling detail emerged when Joyce's family revealed that she had expressed fear for her safety in the months leading up to her disappearance. She had confided in them that she was terrified of Jerry and that she feared he might try to take their daughter from her. Her estranged husband's abusive history only deepened the suspicion that he was involved in her disappearance. Jerry Fischer's history of abuse and violence was not a secret. He had a history of mistreating Joyce. It became increasingly clear that their separation and impending divorce were not amicable. Joyce had taken steps to protect herself and her daughter, even going so far as to take out a restraining order against Jerry in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. She had tried to build a new life away from him, but her fear of his control over her and her daughter lingered. After Joyce went missing, Jerry's life took a troubling turn. In 1979, he was accused of beating his and Joyce's daughter, and he lost custody of her to Joyce's parents. In a further blow to his credibility, he was ordered to have no contact with the child until he underwent a psychiatric evaluation. Jerry's actions raised alarms, and it was clear that his behavior was increasingly erratic and dangerous. After Joyce vanished, Jerry relocated to Florida, far from the scene of his wife's disappearance. He eventually remarried, and he told his friends and new wife that Joyce had suffered from mental illness and had been institutionalized as a long-term patient in a psychiatric hospital. These claims, however, were completely false. Joyce had never been mentally ill, and there was no evidence to suggest she had ever been institutionalized. As the years passed, the investigation into Joyce's disappearance grew cold, and her case went largely unresolved. But in 1987, Jerry was charged with Joyce's murder. The case went to trial, and in 1988, he was convicted of involuntary manslaughter. However, Jerry's conviction was overturned on appeal in 1992, and he was released from prison after serving only 4 years of a sentence. Despite his release, Jerry's actions and his inability to provide a clear explanation of what happened to Joyce continue to haunt the case. Her body was never found, and the circumstances surrounding her disappearance remain a mystery. Authorities believe foul play was involved, but without definitive evidence, Joyce's case remains unsolved.